Welcome to Truth Sentinel, watching over the truth in the news. Very warm welcome to everyone. It's been a while since I put some episodes up. I'm doing a bit of travelling at the moment, as usual. This is one of the only alternative travelling podcasts, and I'm currently in Ukraine again, in Lviv, Ukraine, that's West Ukraine. Later on I'll be going to Thailand and doing some episodes from there. I'm doing less episodes at the moment and working on the Truth Sentinel documentary. Yeah, it's going to be excerpts from some of the shows we've done and covering some of the same topics, and hopefully that'll be coming out later this year. Today we've got quite an interesting topic for you, one that some will find very controversial. I rarely use the word nutcase or nut job unless we're talking about something really insane, like fairies at the bottom of the garden. No offence to any of you that believe in fairies. If you can show me one, that's fine. Some would say though that today's topic is a bit crazy. I wouldn't say so because I think it's got a lot to offer when it comes to questioning our own reality. Each of us holds views that some others would think are crazy. If you believe in aliens, chemtrails, the idea that the universe just happened, I find that a bit crazy, and I'm not sure I actually believe it. Do you believe that you're descended from fish and apes? Or maybe you believe the world was created by some designer such as God? Maybe you don't believe in any kind of God. Maybe life means nothing. You die, you go into the ground. Or do you believe in reincarnation? Some people might think that's crazy, come back as a rabbit or some other kind of animal. And many people believe now that there could be parallel universes. That was once considered insane. David Icke talks about reptilians living amongst us. What do you think about that? Is that crazy? Or would you prefer to believe it in a way that maybe people can be possessed by demons? Because that could be a similar thing in a way. Each of us have our own way of justifying the things we believe, and we offer some rationale to those things that we believe. You'll often feel more confident in your views if it's the accepted mainstream view, or it's backed up by the media or by science, and you'll have the comfort of knowing that millions of others share your view. Do you believe man went to the moon in 1969? It's often spouted as one of the conspiracy theories that nutjobs believe in. I'm not sure, to be honest, but I have seen some documentaries which bring up some very interesting topics. Look into the guys that mysteriously died before the NASA moon landings took place. The team that were in a capsule, one of them was complaining about how they couldn't even communicate between two rooms, so how were they going to land on the moon? If you look at what they had to go through to land on the moon, it's not quite as simple as taking off and then firing to the moon and then just cruising in and land on the moon. Have a look into exactly what they had to do regarding orbits. Leaving the Earth's orbit, getting to the moon's orbit, land on the moon, regaining the moon's orbit, coming back to Earth, getting back in the orbit. If you look into what they had to do, it's pretty incredible. That's all I'm saying. Look into the guy who was going to produce reports showing all the inconsistencies and problems at NASA before the moon landing, and then he wound up dead sometime before he was supposed to produce his report. There's many inconsistencies. Have a look at I know it's a little bit produced for TV, but I thought Conspiracy Theory by Jesse Ventura about the moon landings was quite good. But there's plenty of documentaries like A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. You can also see a video on YouTube about how the first photo of the moon was taken and it looks slightly dubious. Of course it might have happened, but it's worth asking questions and investigating things, and often those questions aren't answered. I think that's part of the problem. What about other things that you've been told during your science lessons at school? Is the sun millions of miles away, for example? Are stars millions of miles away, light years away? How do you know that? Is the Earth a sphere? Do we live on a flat Earth? That would be crazy, right? There's no way we could live on a flat Earth. What springs to mind if someone suggests that? What do you know for sure yourself? Think about it for a moment. The oceans cling to this ball that's spinning at over 1,000 miles an hour, and we know it's a sphere because we've all seen it, right? Or have we? What have we seen? We've seen photos from space, ISS feeds from space. When you go to the beach and you can see the boats go over the horizon, right? Can you? Because hang on a second, apparently if you pull out a telescope, that boat comes back into view. so it hasn't really gone over the horizon. But you can see the curve from a plane. Go on a plane. Next time you're on a plane, tell me if you can see the curve for sure. Or do you just see a little haze in the distance? And then take a look to your left through the other window. Can you see the curve from that one? You're seeing across quite a distance there, over 20,000 feet. So you should be able to see the curve, right? Or should you be able to see the curve? I mean, these things are worth talking about, and investigating. At what height should you be able to see the curve of the Earth? And look into how high have we flown since the moon landings in 1969. How many moon landings did we do? When was the last time we went to the moon? Why haven't we gone to the moon? I think these are important questions that you need to ask, and they bring up some other questions in themselves, like, why haven't we been back to the moon since 1972, I think it is? And how many times did we go to the moon from 1969 to 1972? I mean, if it was only a couple of times, that means it was quite difficult, right? Or were we flying to the moon sort of quite on a regular basis, like it was a domestic flight or something like that? Have a look into it. Well, of course, we know the world is spherical because you can take a round-the-world flight, can't you? You can just fly around the world. Well, of course you can't. You can't take a round-the-world flight. The longest flights I tend to go on are about 12 hours. In fact, I think the longest flight you can actually go on is about 16 hours. That doesn't take you around much of the world. But anyway, NASA showed us photos of the Earth from space, right? I mean, there was that one in the 70s. We should trust NASA, this military organisation. Have a look on YouTube and just check out some of the inconsistencies that seem to be happening with the ISS. Things like water bubbles appearing and blue screens that seem to be being used and mysterious objects that are being grabbed that aren't really there. It's worth looking into, that's all I'm saying. But they recently showed us photos of the Earth from Saturn. Did you see that? The little white dot on a black background. I replicated that on Microsoft Paint just to show how simplistic that photo was. And you do have to ask yourself the question, if they were sent a probe to Saturn, why couldn't they have programmed it so it just took a couple of shots of the Earth on the way? It's fair to say we don't have many actual photos of the Earth from space. There are a couple, that's for sure, and you can look into those. There's also a Chinese website that's set up that's claiming to take a photo of the Earth every day. Is that proof? Is that proof enough for you? It might be. Anyway, if you look into the Flat Earth Society and people who have started to question whether we do live on a spherical Earth and are saying that we actually live on a flat Earth, and they got the experiments to show it. Have a look at the Bedford Level experiment that was done many years ago. It's worth reading about because you'll get to know some of the science that goes on behind some of the experiments. From that perspective alone, there's a lot to be said for looking into the flat Earth topic and deciding for yourself how you know that you live on a spherical Earth. There are many differing views amongst the flat Earthers. Some believe there may be a dome above the Earth, and they cite examples of rockets hitting perhaps the dome, such as maybe the Challenger disaster. And there's another conspiracy. Some people say that some of the crew of the Challenger disaster are still alive. You can look at the pictures, the photos of some people that are still alive today that look very remarkably similar to those guys. Stuff like that. Is it important? I don't know. Well, it's important if they're lying to us, I think. What about if we did not live on a flat Earth and NASA were lying to you? Would that bother you? Is it important? That's another question that you could ask yourself. It would be very important to me personally. I think it would be astounding if we lived on a flat Earth. So I certainly want to find out, and I want to find out for myself. I mean, my personal view is I kind of think we're living on a sphere. But some of the experiments that the flat Earthers have done has led me to think, well, I want to invest some of my time into finding out how accurate these experiments are and whether there's any flaws in them. Opening your mind to questioning things is not always comfortable, but how many things do you really achieve by staying in your comfort zone? The flat Earth topic is a great academic exercise, if nothing else. People who are researching it are opening themselves up for ridicule, but we live in a crazy world, and it might be crazier than you think. The world could be a lot darker than you think. It could be run by reptilians. We could live on a flat Earth. It could have been designed, and they're trying to keep it secret because they don't want you to know that you live on designed Earth, or they don't want you to know for some other reason. Who knows? We are going to talk to one of the leading talkers on the topic of the flat Earth. Author of the video Flat Earth Clues, which you must watch if this episode intrigues you at all. Mark Sargent is going to join us. He started his career playing computer games professionally in Boulder, Colorado. I believe he now lives somewhere near Seattle. He spent a few decades training people in software, and in 2014 he looked into the flat earth theory and started researching it and discovered it wasn't such a laughable idea after all. I think if you look into some of the claims yourself, you'll see why. Early in 2015 he released a series of YouTube videos called Flat Earth Clues, which delves into the possibility of our human civilization being inside some kind of Truman show-like enclosed system, and how it's been hidden from the public since the 50s. Let's talk to him now. Okay, welcome to Truth Sentinel, Mark. Very nice of you to join us.
It is my pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
You're very welcome. I know the first rule of Flat Earth is not to mention it, but it's almost impossible to avoid in today's interview. So let's start with the obvious cliche question. What first got you into making Flat Earth Clues and talking about this topic?
What initially got me into it was that I was a conspiracy guy. Still am. I looked into all sorts of different conspiracies, and this is the one conspiracy that everybody has heard of, but nobody has looked at because it's so obvious. It's ridiculous, it's silly, it's insane, and why would you ever look at it? It's the book on the shelf that somebody gave you as a Christmas gift, and you're never going to open it because it looks terrible. The book cover is terrible, the title is terrible. It might as well literally be called My Favorite Poop Sandwich. That's seriously what it would, because it's just awful. It's like, oh, it's a terrible book. And when I was on YouTube, I happened to glance, I was digging through, to see what's the heck's out there, and saw a video by a German guy who was talking about the flight routes in the southern hemisphere, how they didn't make any sense on a globe. The connections were really weird, and there were almost no non-stops, and so on and so on. So I kind of looked into it, and then I looked into another video by a Canadian named Matt Boylan, who said that he worked for NASA as a contract artist, and during some high-level party, they mentioned to him that the GPS doesn't work down in Antarctica because the Earth is flat. At that point, I'm going, okay, all right. These are good stories. I like them as stories, but they cannot possibly be true. There's no way. Everybody knows the Earth is a globe. And I made the mistake. I started looking into it. Again, if anyone's listening out there, if you don't want your life to be turned upside down, literally, don't look at this thing. You don't want to do it because you're going to lose a whole bunch of sleep, and by the time you're done, everything's going to change.
Yeah, you'll start questioning everything.
Oh yeah, you'll literally question everything, and you'll have to revisit every conspiracy you've ever thought about. So that's what I did. I started looking at this thing, and I'm stubborn. I consider myself a very creative problem solver, not necessarily fast, but creative. And I thought I could solve it. And 9 months later, I wake up in the middle of the night in February of 2015, and I had it. I was like, okay, I'm going to go the other way, which is I'm going to make a series of videos. I'm going to call them Flat Earth Clues, and I'm going to put them out on the internet, and I'm going to basically ask the question to all the academic people out there, the brainy types, people with some sort of master's degree in something. And tell me how you know the Earth is a globe. And that's how I got started, and thought for sure in the beginning that it was going to get shot down. It did not get shot down. As a matter of fact, it resonated extremely well to where I was getting interview requests within the first few weeks. And the book thing happened within 8 months, and podcasts and websites and all this fun stuff. And subject matter experts were contacting me to where now, here we are 2 years later. And it's a community that's massive, and not only is the community massive on YouTube, but there's a hidden community out there. There's the secret flat earthers, the closet flat earthers. They've got to number in the millions by now.
Yeah, because it's probably not something that a lot of people want to admit that they've been thinking about or looking into, because you open yourself to ridicule, I would imagine.
Oh yeah, your family, and I still get emails every single week about people. They'll say, oh yeah, I went and told people over again, that's the Fight Club reference, which is the first rule of Flat Club, is you do not talk about Flat Club, because if you talk about this to your family over dinner, you better be ready for a lot of massive knee-jerk reactions. And that's what eventually will be, if I do public speaking stuff on this, will be the big preface is there is no other topic that generates this sort of emotion, and I dare you to find one. Now, of course, if you're big anti-vaccination or gay rights or black rights or women's rights or something like that, yeah, you may have an opinion on it, but you're not going to lash out at the person, right in their face and say, you're stupid, you're an idiot, I can't believe you're looking at this. This is the only topic, and it's because of your conditioning. You were given a globe. It was put in your classroom. No, nobody's been to space. You haven't been to space. You don't know anyone that's been to space. Technically, even the United States government says there's only 500 people ever who even claim to have been to space. So if you haven't been there, why are you getting so upset? It's because the globe was in your classroom since you were 6 years old. And you were just told this over and over, repetition. You were told, this is where you live. This is where you live. And 12 years later, that's it. You're done. And even doing that through high school makes it difficult to convince, but not impossible, obviously, because here we are. But if you have a master's degree or higher in a physical science, there's nothing we can do for you. The conditioning is too far gone. You'd have to take some professional counseling just to snap you out of it. I mean, I talked to a guy the other day who had a master's in just mathematics, and there's nothing I could do for him. He was basically saying that math is the truth. Math was the religion to him, and because math proved that it was a globe, even though it could be faked, math proved for 400 years. Like no. And anyway, I could go off and on. So continue on with whatever you're going to ask.
Yeah, I've got plenty of questions, so don't ever feel so. Yeah, we can keep them. Some of your answers can be.
I will.
They don't have to be too long. You can talk as much as you like, but I'm just letting you know that there's plenty to go through today.
Okay, go.
It's a huge topic. I was going to say.
I will try to be more brief.
No, that's fine. I was going to say. So, do you think part of the point of discussing flat Earth is an academic exercise in making people work things out for themselves and not being slaves to higher academic authorities?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that's an interesting point that you'd bring up, because a guy just this morning, a YouTube channel called Josh Tolley, one of the first guys I've seen with a channel over 100,000 subscribers, where he opened up saying that really this is a thinking exercise, which is don't lash out at flat earthers for the belief, because they are helping people go through thought process. Heck, more people are learning basic physics and basic scientific principles, basic science, everything, because of what we're doing. Before this thing happened, nobody knew what 8 inches per mile squared meant. Nobody. And now you could ask any flat earther, and they'll all say, what is it? It's 8 inches per mile squared. And how fast is the Earth rotating, and how fast is the Earth supposedly rotating around the sun, and the distance to the moon, the distance to the sun, so on and so on. It's really been amazing how it has opened people's minds up to questioning things and not taking things for granted.
That's very true. I can attest to that. Since looking into this a bit, I've sort of looked at the rotation of the Earth, the speed of rotation, and the 8 inches per mile drop, which is a bit more complicated than you think at first. Like it's 8 inches squared, like you say.
Yeah. Everyone, in fact, a lot of people screw it up the first time, because you don't. In fact, that shows you why this thing is resonating so well, is because science is. I'm not making fun of the audience. We've dumbed down the population to such a degree that even the basic algebra stuff has been lost, to where I've said 8 inches per mile to square to people, a lot of people, and they just glaze over. It's like, oh crap, I do not remember my high school mathematics. And it's easy, it's 8 inches times every mile times itself. And even then, it gets a little trickier once you get past like 1,000 miles. But for our intents and purposes, most of our distances are less than 500 miles. Yeah. But it's 2 miles. It's 2 times 2, which is 4, times 8 inches, which is 32, and 3 times 3 is 9, times 8 is 72, and then it gets worse from there. And that is for us, it's been the crux of how this thing has really grabbed hold, because there's distances out there which are easy to understand. 50 miles, 50 times 50 times 8, which comes in at just about under 1,700 feet, right? And that means that's 1,700 feet of curvature. You should not see an object at 50 miles that's less than 1,700 feet tall, and we do all the time. And I didn't even put that in the clues. You know, the curvature thing is really a great. And since people tested on water, because water doesn't curve supposedly, everyone goes to the beach or their nearest body of water, and that's what they make the tests on. And I love it. It's been fantastic.
Yeah, and I've been looking into flat Earth, and there's a lot of definitely a lot of interesting points made. Anyone out there who thinks it's a crazy idea, just start looking into it a bit, and you'll see that you'll be prompted to, a bit like episodes of Lost, you'll be prompted to move on to the next one to see what you get.
To defend their point of view, it absolutely is crazy. That's the point. You've been conditioned so much to never ever look at it that your knee-jerk response is it's crazy. I'm not kidding you when I said the first time I clicked on a YouTube video that had Flat Earth in the title, I physically got flushed, embarrassed to click on it, and I caught myself doing it. I was like, whoa, why? I've clicked on some pretty wild things on the internet. We all have. But why would this embarrass me? This is stupid. And that's because of the conditioning. And the question that people should ask, the easiest question out there that I've been trying to boil it down for people is this. Eventually, if I say to you, how do you know the Earth is a globe? Sooner or later, you're going to lean on one of the space programs. I don't care if it's NASA or JAXA or the European group, or it doesn't really matter. So how did we know before that? If NASA released the first picture, they were the first in 1972, how did you know before 1972? And he said, well, no, NASA was around since the 50s. So fine, 1958, they were formed. How did you know before 1958? Because you can't go back before that. And I say, that we've been told it's a globe for 450 years before that. How did you know? And eventually you're going to have to admit the words. And that is, science told you.
That's true.
And I mean, I'm very clear about that. They told you. You don't know. They told you. Fire burns, water is wet. You drop something, it falls to the ground. These are things you can test right now, right? But when it comes to the shape of the Earth, this is something that the United States military announced. People inside this country, you want to believe it, fine. I get it. Go team, rah rah, USA. But outside of this country, I don't know why everyone believes the Americans. I don't know why. I mean, are we that shiny and everyone knows the Americans lie through their teeth. So why would they believe this? And it's because they did it through science. They did it with NASA wears white uniforms. They don't carry guns. They smile for the cameras, and it looks legit. They seem harmless. They seem benign, but it's exactly the opposite.
Yeah, and as you mentioned before, it evokes strong views if you question it with someone. And I think I agree with you that people should at least know something truly for themselves. If they're going to have such strong views on something, strong beliefs, they should at least know the ins and outs of it a bit more. I mean, right. I'm open to a lot of the ideas, but I'm not quite as convinced yet that we definitely are on a flat Earth. I wondered whether you are now, whether you're 100% sure, like some other people in the flat Earth community are, and if so, what were the key facts that tipped you over to the flat Earth side?
I will tell you what I've told people since the beginning, because I really haven't wavered, which is on the flat Earth side, which is one of the things I really love about the community, is that we carry a lot of different flags. So it's kind of like, I use an English reference, the Scottish Highlands, all the clans. There's so many different opposing, but they do have a common enemy, which is the globe. So on our side, we have people that believe in a dome. We have people that believe that there's no dome. We have people who believe in other continents outside of it, or that it's an infinite plane and there's different pockets. But what we do know for an absolute fact is that the powers that be are going to, in a huge amount of effort and spending a lot of resources to hide what this world really is. The globe is here's a perfect example. There was a lot of little things that convinced me when I was building, which is why I did the clues the way I did. There was a lot of different aspects that pointed in the same direction. If one of those clues would have pointed in a completely different direction, I wouldn't have done them. But they all pointed in the same thing, which is that at the very least, the world isn't what you think it is right now. And if you want a quick example, would be the lack of pictures of the Earth from space. I mean, sheer lack of pictures up until very, very recently, which is the Americans took the first shot in 1972, and you recognize it was the most highly reproduced picture in our civilization, which shows the bottom part of Africa and of all of Antarctica. And there was no second picture literally until 2 years ago. 43 years went by and nobody took a full disk sunlight picture of the Earth or claimed that there was a full picture. It was always just composite images. In fact, all the way up until 2000, there wasn't even any CGI images. It wasn't even composite. I saw that for an absolute fact. I happened to just, for whatever reason, randomly search the internet because I was looking for iconic globe pictures for the tech support team that I was managing, and there were none. It was only that Apollo 17 mission photo. And you can't tell me, 43 years, you're going to a lot of trouble not to show you what there should. Not only should there be thousands and thousands and thousands of photos from the Earth from space, from every probe we've ever sent out in varying resolutions, but there should be an HD channel right now with a geostationary satellite or a different satellite. There should be multiple satellites out there broadcasting the Earth from space, rotating with the Earth, morphing in high resolution all the time. And there isn't. I mean, that's just one example, but let me throw one more thing at you, which is the big thing that, and people will run into this when you're going down this trail, because I've seen it too many times in emails, is you'll lean on the space program and you'll look at the stuff. You'll look and say, well, the space program will save me from this madness because obviously it's insanity. There's so many things that aren't there that should be there. Like, there is no footage of an astronaut outside of a spacecraft, and I don't care if it's the moon or anything even in orbit, where he takes the camera and he pans 180 degrees or further. In exterior. Interior doesn't count because you can shoot interior anywhere. Exterior, it's never ever happened. There's no footage of any rocket with a camera on it leaving the pad and leaving Earth orbit or coming back. It's never happened. We don't even have a movie of an astronaut in an airlock where he opens up the airlock and he goes out of it from his point of view. There's so many little things that just aren't there when you're leaning on NASA. The Van Allen radiation belts. It's a beautiful one, which is the Van Allen belts announced by NASA in 1959. Says they're super deadly. 60,000 miles thick. And yet we sent Apollo 8 through Apollo 17 through these belts. Nobody died. Nobody got radiation poisoning. Nobody even got cancer. So what shielding did you use? NASA, there is no shielding. You can look up the specs yourself. It was aluminum and plastic. And that radiation can be stopped by lead and it can be stopped by gold. But they're very, very heavy. And they still won't answer that question.
I think that's a lot of the problems with some of these topics is NASA aren't very forthcoming with answering questions, are they?
No, they're not. And to be fair, they had a hard road because when they decided to do this, starting with the Apollo program, they kind of painted themselves into a corner because whatever technology they used to fake the moon missions, and they absolutely were faked. I mean, those moon missions have been torn apart for years now. They had to stay consistent with everything else. They showed space a certain way, and they had to keep showing space that way because that's how they showed it in the 60s, and the footage is dated really horribly, and NASA's scrambling. They don't know what to do at this point. They're releasing some stuff here and there, but the images are terrible.
Well, I mean, I have to agree with you on some of these points. There was a recent in the last few weeks, I would say, image of the Earth from Saturn. Did you see that one? Which is literally a white dot. And I actually replicated it in 10 minutes on Microsoft Paint. You can make it. You can copy it yourself using Microsoft Paint. I did that just to illustrate. It's not very impressive, and you would have thought they could have snapped some images on the way to Saturn of Earth. Yeah. So I agree with you that there doesn't seem to be enough pictures of the Earth. But
no, one of your fellow countrymen, he's a fairly popular parkour guy. Vegan guy, he said on a popular British thing where he goes, it's when you look at the NASA stuff, he goes, it's really thin, the term. There's just not enough there to convince you. Whereas we have tons of arguments we can throw out, and you get very few rebuttals on their side.
Is that Eric Dubai, is it?
No, not Eric. No, not one of our guys. One of I can't remember his name. I'll send it to you when we're done. Yeah. But he's one of your countrymen.
Okay, fine. So, do you think people have a big problem talking about something that goes against everything they've been taught all their life, and Flat Earth exposes that and kind of gets them to, if you bring it up, they kind of glitch and almost short
Oh yeah.
circuit then?
Yeah. I'll use two references. One is a movie. One was from real life. The Matrix reference, Neo, when Neo was first told, and the saying from the movie is, "We do not free a mind after a certain age." Where when he was finally told, when he was shown what the Matrix is, he flipped out. It's jarring to you. And I actually had an elderly gentleman during a call-in show, not my show, but a different show, where he asked me how old I was, and I told him I was younger than him. And he goes, "How dare you? How dare you, young man, tell me the world isn't what I think it is?" Because it's the only conspiracy you can't walk away from or run away from or hide from. You don't want to talk about 9/11, fine. You don't want to talk about Sandy Hook or any of the American wars or anything we've ever done. That's fine. There are some secrets that can be buried in the desert and you're never going to see them again. But when it comes to this, the world itself, this is something you're walking around on. And if all of a sudden I tell you, "Oh yeah, by the way, you're in a soundstage," you're in a Truman show, you're in a planetarium/terrarium, and you've been there your whole life and you've been fooled, but it's not your fault. You're still gonna get it's uneasy for some people. I've had people say they get claustrophobic, and a lot of people, it's the ultimate mind-blowing thing. It's this Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah. I was thinking during this conversation we should sort of reference maybe some things that people can check out for themselves on the internet. One thing I was thinking of about the moon landings, again with a lot of with flat Earth moon landings, I'm still not sure, but the more you investigate things, the more doubtful things have become. If you look at the interviews that the astronauts give just after they come back to
Right.
Earth, it's very dubious. It's
Yeah, the international.
their expressions are not of people who've just done one of the greatest things mankind have achieved.
Oh yeah, that was the international press conference that they did, and in full color, decent resolution. I think it was shot. I don't know what it was shot with, but the three astronauts that were up there were their body language was completely wrong. We've had people that have taken a lot of psychology look at these guys and say, "Okay, what's the deal with this?" Yeah, you're right. They should have been smiling. You couldn't have removed those smiles surgically from their faces. Should have been there, and instead it was the opposite. These guys looked like they were in an interrogation room. They looked guilty as sin.
I actually I was talking with a friend about this, and we've said they look as though they've been just it's just been revealed to them that the training session they did in a studio, they were then told, "Okay, by the way, we're going to have to tell the public that was real, what that training
Right.
session you just did." And it's almost like they're not happy about doing it, but they've kind of very quickly had to go along with it. Or a flat earther might say they've been up and they've seen that the Earth's flat, and they.
No. Yeah, no. I disagree. I don't think any astronaut's been the top of anything because it's too risky. I mean, you're putting a human being on a pile of liquid explosives. That is not a place you want to be. I think they were told though, and I think the Apollo program was the last group of astronauts where they told them why they were faking it, why they were doing what they were doing, which was the Earth isn't what you think it is, and who knows, the ulterior motive. It's like, the aliens told us not to tell anybody, or whatever it is. They were told, but the Apollo astronauts were informed of the truth, and it was too big for them. I mean, most of these guys became recluses. They crawled into bottles. They acted really weird. I mean, look up the Neil Armstrong speech that he did in the 90s with Bill Clinton, where he was addressing some future space people and saying that there's so much work to do if you can uncover one of truth's hidden protective layers. It's like, why would you say this during a speech? It was on television. Why would you do that? And I don't want to we could do an entire show on the moon landing stuff. You guys want to look up stuff that tears apart the moon landing, there's tons of videos out there. But I will summarize it with this. I didn't believe in the moon missions for a long time either, but I couldn't come up with a reason of why you would fake it, because that's the big one everyone comes back to, which is why do you fake the moon missions? And for me, I had a good reason, which was, America's great, rah rah, wave the flag, go USA. I get that. It's a good reason, but it's not a great reason. Flat Earth answers it, which is they didn't want to fake the moon missions. They had to. They absolutely had to fake it. If you do not fake the moon missions and do it fairly quickly, you've got to do it before 1980, then you're leaving the door open for the big subcontractors, the people that made the parts for NASA. NASA is just a military organization. The equipment is built by somebody else. Those companies could step in and do their own thing and do it on a commercial level. You do not want corporations like Lockheed or General Dynamics or Boeing in cooperation with, I don't know, who else wants to fund it. BMW, Mercedes, Doritos. Somebody's going to want to go up there and plant the proverbial flag up on the moon. You don't want that to happen. You've got to shut it down. You've got to militarize space, and you've got to do it quick, and then make it to where people have no reason to go. And then they say, oh, it's boring. There's nothing there. We're never going to go back. And then of course the big mystery is like why the Russians quit. The big space race, and then Americans get there first, and the Russians just shut down their space program. Come on.
Just a quick reference back to something you mentioned previously, the ISS. A lot of people will say, look, they do stream the pictures of the Earth or video of the Earth from the ISS. I know personally there's some problems with that, but just for listeners, what's your issue with the ISS stream?
The ISS stream, look, if you've seen any of the space movies that have come out in the last 5-10 years, the special effects teams have gotten very good at what they do. We can do this. I challenge you, anyone that thinks the ISS is real, as far as the live streams go and watch the movie Gravity again with George Clooney and Sandra Bullock. Not necessarily in that order, because I know she was nominated for that role. And that is, if you took the facial shots out of that movie, and you could intersplice those shots with just about anything NASA has put out recently, and they would even look better than the NASA footage. That's how good we've gotten. We can fake space now to a limited extent. If it's pre-recorded, we can fake it. Live, we still have a huge problem with it. But when it comes to CGI graphics, look, we've all seen the movies over the years. We can make a good fake space movie, not like in the 60s. And look what we did in the 60s. The one movie that stood the test of time was Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Watch that on Blu-ray again if you've never seen it. It is aged amazingly well, and that movie is 50 years old. So. Yeah.
And some people say that they're using sort of blue screen, green screen.
Or both.
Yeah.
Blue screen is still used nowadays. So some people, I got to mention this because people come back and say, "Oh, they don't even use blue screen anymore." I go, "Well, hell, they don't. They absolutely use blue screen." Blue screen, you guys can look up the difference on YouTube. There's tutorials on this. Blue screen is used for darker environments like nighttime scenes if you're doing CGI, and green screen is used for a lot of daytime stuff. And since a lot of the movies nowadays are shot in brighter sunlighty CGI stuff, green screen is more heavily used. But blue screen is absolutely still used.
Yeah, and I wasn't convinced about this, but I did see something very interesting on YouTube the other day where a guy, I don't know if you've seen the ISS feed video where it shows a guy passing a baseball cap. He's spinning it around and he passes it.
Oh, yeah. That's brilliant because in order to do that, and the reason why they screwed that up, you guys don't know what we're talking about, go to a YouTube channel called DITRH. He was one of the first people to break this story. And two astronauts are in front of a camera, and one of them's twirling a microphone and a baseball cap simultaneously. And something goes wrong where it looks like he makes a hand motion like he's moving either the baseball cap or the microphone over to the guy to his right, and the guy to his right grabs it and then moves it over to his far right to the side of the spacecraft. The problem is that the object never moves. The guy grabs nothing. The object was never there. So did the astronauts screw up? Where they reached for something, did they miss their cue, or did the monitor? Because if you're doing that sort of thing, it's sort of like the weathermen on television. The weathermen on television, they've got that big graphic behind them, but they never look at the graphic. They're looking at the monitor in front of them. That shows them what they're pointing at. And that's what I think happened. I think the monitor in front of them, the live CGI graphics screwed up, and they did only what they could, but it was horrible. It was absolutely the most blatant thing I've seen all year. And the reason it happened is because they were doing a live feed with some school children from the United States. And it's like, look, you can't do live stuff anymore. I don't know why they keep trying. There's a reason why all the shows out there aren't live. Live means you're gonna make mistakes, and for something like that, it's critical that you do not make mistakes, and they did. It was blatant.
And another one was a few other videos I've seen where there's supposed to be a time lapse. Sending messages from space, and they're sort of speaking live, and you can see that although they're trying to pretend there's a time lapse, their facial reaction to some things are said are immediate, so it doesn't quite tie in.
Oh yeah, where you're talking when a news reporter, again, when you're trying to do something live or even pre-recorded, but live will definitely give you away. You like a news reporter is talking to somebody on the ISS. There's a time delay supposedly. We used to have these on phone lines, years ago, but there's supposed, could be a second or two where you're waiting for the question, but yet it's never consistent. And the time delay, it's weird. Sometimes it's 2 seconds, sometimes it's half a second, sometimes it's 4 seconds. It's all over the map. And then you see things like the Chris Hadfield orchestra sync up, where Chris Hadfield, the astronaut with a guitar on supposedly the International Space Station, is playing with a choir and a singer down on the planet, and they're absolutely synced up. That cannot happen. I can tell you that right now. Even over Skype, there is a slight millisecond delay. I've tried this because I've tried doing a sync up singing with somebody else, and we can never ever get it, and that's just Skype to Skype.
Yeah, let's not try that today, Mark.
No, let's not definitely do that. I do not consider myself a great singer.
Yeah, I actually looked into that. Someone claimed that perhaps when the ISS is moving around, sometimes it's closer to Earth and sometimes it's farther away.
Whatever.
Yeah.
No, it's not. Even if you believe mainstream science, the variation is only a few percent. It's no, it's not. At that point, you'd have to say, oh no, well sometimes it's 400 miles and sometimes it's 2,000 miles. No, it can't happen because if you believe mainstream science, above that you run into the Van Allen belts and then they'd be dead. So there is no variation. There's a reason why mainstream science says there's this very narrow band where all the satellites supposedly are and the ISS and everything else.
Yeah. Now some people say that that people who believe in the flat Earth idea are not only sort of wasting people's time, but they're there to discredit alternative thinkers and to make them sort of get open-minded people to start thinking and talking about something that just makes
something
all their other ideas.
That takes away. In fact, the interview I'm doing after this, I'm sure he's going to go down that road because he's going to say, well, it's going to take people away from the real conspiracies. The big conspiracies, the ones that are legitimate. I'd come back and say, okay, two things. One, you don't need flat Earth to convince people that conspiracy people are a little off.
Yeah.
Conspiracy guys have had a bad rap for a long, long time. But the second thing is, okay, tell me a conspiracy that's out there, a mainstream conspiracy that's bigger than this. Normally I'd use the words more important because everyone's going to have their personal bias. It's like, oh, the Pizzagate thing, if it was real, was definitely more important. I'm going, no, it's not. You just haven't broadened your mind big enough or wide enough to take this all in. Which is, I don't care what conspiracy you can think about. Again, 9/11, JFK, Pearl Harbor, Boston bombing. I don't care what it is. It's all underneath the umbrella, which is this thing, which is this starts you. In fact, this should probably amplify every other conspiracy that's out there, which is if you can get your head around potentially the Earth, that we're all in a Truman show, then what else is real? And if anything, it allows you to not judge every other conspiracy that's out there. And I can't judge anybody. I laugh when somebody says, okay, I've got something for you, man. You're going to think it's a little crazy. I'm going, dude, I literally start my day with flat Earth. So whatever you got, I guarantee you it is not going to be as nutty. I don't care, seriously, if it's Elvis having Bigfoot's baby. I don't care. I'm not going to judge it. I will look at it and say, okay, well, I may not believe it, but I'm not going to condemn you for it. I've never condemned a single conspiracy since.
Yeah, it does require an open mind, and it would take you to a scary place where, you might be living on a planet that's controlled by reptilians or something like that.
Yeah, again, it's depending on what kind of personality you are and your outlook on life. Potentially, yeah, you could go to dark places or you could go to light places. And that is, if we are in sort of a Truman Show thing, who are the overlords? And the fact that you're even using the word overlords, or is it something more benign? Lots of religious people have jumped in on this and said, is this proof of intelligent design? Is this the handprint of God? And are we being kept in here to protect us from what's out there, or are they being protected from us? Are we a box of kittens, or we are a box of scorpions? I think it could go either way but I kind of lean towards scorpions because Lord knows we've done some horrible things over the millennia.
Still, it would be nice to think we're kittens.
I would, sure, why not? We've got some of those traits, but you know full well. I mean, we've got some dangerous traits in the mix.
Yeah, definitely. Some scientists will say that a belief in flat Earth and the questions asked about it are due to a lack of understanding about complex scientific explanations like refraction and things like that. What would you say to that?
Good. I personally, this is the one time I can say I'm glad that the powers that be dumbed down the public to such a degree that basic scientific principles are now coming in as static, because it helps us. It gives us a level, no play on words there, a level playing field to start. Because beforehand, science would just say, oh, well, because people weren't conditioned with the other scientific principles like refraction, then they can't just regurgitate it. No one knows it. So we come in and we get our foothold in and find that we get to say, okay, this is our position, prove us wrong. And because not many people look, there's not as many heavy scientific people in the world as there used to be, then they have a hard time coming out there. But no, there is no scientific principle that can shoot this down. There is no silver bullet. If it hasn't happened by now, it's not going to happen. Academia has had their chance, and we've heard all the arguments at this point. There is nothing. I don't care what you want to say about refraction and superior mirages and law of perspective. We'll just throw it right back in your face, because to make our arguments work, we had to use mainstream science. We're kind of using it like judo, where you use the person's body weight against them. That's what we're using against science. We didn't come up with 8 inches per mile squared. That's your stuff. We didn't come up with a law of perspective. Also you. And so on and so on. We all this stuff we took from mainstream science, and we're saying, look, your stuff doesn't work. It doesn't apply here for whatever reason. And really a lot of it comes down to social media and technology, where the camera technology has improved such a degree that now we can take a zoom lens and we can zoom in HD to a boat that's supposedly gone. I mean, you literally cannot see it from the beach, and we can zoom into it and say, okay, you thought it went over the curve. Now it's back again. What's your explanation? Well, it's a mirage. Well, it's not upside down. Well, it's a mirage. Well, no, it's super clear. And oh, look, the sun just went behind it, and we can still see it. So what is it? And it's not just a boat. I put a challenge out to anyone in science and say, look, find me an object, any object, over water, over, say, 150 miles or less, that you can't see with some sort of technology. Find me an object that it's impossible to see. And you say, well, the curvature of the Earth says you can't see it. Fine, show me an object that you can't see. It's never been done, and it's just the opposite. We can see everything. And some people will finally say, well, you can't see Japan from Los Angeles. I go, you know what? If you made this place a vacuum, I bet you could. If you took away the weather and made it perfectly flat and took away all the atmosphere, because we're looking mostly through nitrogen. If you could do that, I bet you could, if you had good enough technology. Because that's really
some people have done experiments like the Bedford Levels experiments that people can check out on the internet.
Right.
And
right. Oh yeah.
I think the explanation for that was given was refraction, but and some of the scientific explanations are sort of overly complicated. Like if you read the explanation, it just doesn't seem to make sense. But you're required really to decide that you don't understand it, therefore it must be correct. Someone with a higher intelligence has worked it out for you.
Exactly. The perfect example of that would be well, there's a couple different examples I could use, but one of them would be the atmosphere, for example, where there's a, we have atmosphere up to a certain point, then you have the vacuum of space. And we say, okay, is there a bleeding edge to the atmosphere and then a vacuum? Is it a hard edge where you have atmosphere, then vacuum? Because how is the vacuum of space not ripping off the entire atmosphere that we live in? Because vacuum is very, very powerful, and the atmosphere is pretty fragile. And the argument to science is, well, we'll work out a whole bunch of equations, but the point is our atmosphere is still here, so obviously our equations work. That's like, well, no, I don't know if you can say it like that. You can say that gravity is holding down the atmosphere, but you're still not counteracting the vacuum entirely, are you? I mean, how exactly is that happening? And yeah, science will use math. Another perfect example would be that science will come back and say, we proved the globe through math for 400 years. That is their argument. We proved it through math. I'm going, okay. You can be 99.99% sure, because you're using math, that it's a globe. But until you get high enough to take the picture, and Neil deGrasse Tyson will come back and say, oh no, the pictures don't matter. Of course they matter. To the general public, the lowest common denominator, the mouth breathers, they absolutely matter. Until you get high enough to take the picture, what do you really know? And you're taking a guess. And eventually they'll admit to that now, and then I'll throw the core of the earth thing at them as well. I'm going, look, you look in, here's the difference between science and, scientism, I should say, and what we're dealing with, or what we're trying to do, is you can open up any children's textbook, I don't care what year it is, and you'll see the cross-section of the earth. We all have seen it, the red band and orange and yellow and white, right? Cross-section of the earth. And that is completely a guess. Absolutely, it's an artist's illustration, and at the bottom, they should have some sort of disclaimer saying, we don't know what's down there. We're taking a guess. And they don't, because they don't like questions. They don't like, because it's an open-ended question. So what they do is in small print somewhere else, they say, well, we really don't know. Well, there's a problem with that. And that is the 9-year-old that opened up that textbook, they don't see the small print. So they see that as fact, absolute fact. Even though when, they say it's 4,000 miles, if you dig a hole, if you believe mainstream science, it takes you 4,000 miles to get to the center of the earth. Fine. How deep have you dug to tell us what the center of the earth looks like? 2,000 miles? 100 miles? 10? You dug down 8 miles. That's it. Nobody's ever dug deeper than 8 miles. So why are you telling us not only what our core looks like, but the core of everything looks like? You tell us what the core of Jupiter looks like. You tell us what the core of the sun looks like. And even though you don't know, because you don't put the disclaimer on there, look, we do disclaimers in commercials nowadays, professional on closed course, do not attempt, right? You don't see that in science books. They won't do it.
I totally agree with you on that. I do think it's that it should be explained that a lot of scientific knowledge out there is really guesswork at best, because I find it extremely dubious when they sort of start telling me about the internal core of Saturn or something like that. They don't know until they get there and dig down, or at least take soil samples and things like that.
Exactly. And look, science isn't. I'm not trying to be an anti-intellectual. That's all science is bad. I'm not saying that. Science has made some wonderful things for us. Light bulb, super great. Air conditioning, hey, love that. Microwave ovens, very convenient. 99.9% of the people don't even know how they work. Right? They might as well be magic ovens. But when it comes to other things, science takes risks. Don't think that they're incorruptible. That's the difference. When Neil deGrasse Tyson comes out and says science is right whether you believe in it or not, it's one of the most arrogant things I've ever heard. Like, look, you guys are men like anything else. You can be bought, you can be sold. We've seen it time and time again. And forget about the military stuff. Where scientists were told, okay, you've got to develop stuff like, I don't know, nerve gas and napalm and atomic weapons. Forget about that. I'm talking about the consumer products where you rush to market before you finish the testing. And we've seen it time and time and time again. Everything from lead paint to DDT to asbestos to, I don't know, the scientists that took the bribes and told everybody that cigarettes didn't kill you. It happens. These are not things that are in our distant past. They're happening even now. And don't think that just because you use a lot of science stuff, no question. Everyone's got a smartphone. Everybody's got these cool little things. We benefited from science, but science isn't an absolute. And they've kind of fallen to the old power corrupts thing, where they've turned it into their own religion, and it's back. It's finally coming back to haunt them, and we're going to call them out till they finally fess up.
Fair enough. You mentioned about maps, and I just wanted to point out to listeners to check out so that some of the standard maps have got inaccuracies, like Africa is 3 times bigger than depicted. It's about 14 times larger than Greenland, for example.
Yep. Yeah,
the maps, they're both the same size.
The Mercator map, even if you believe the map that they show in schools, which is known as the Mercator map, is 500 years old. It was built to enhance shipping routes and the prominence of the northern hemisphere versus the southern hemisphere, and it is absolutely wrong. There is, even if you still believe in the globe, the Mercator map is wrong. You want to see a more accurate map, look at the Gall-Peters projection, which is far more accurate. Far more accurate. But they won't even put those into schools because they're afraid it's going to be too jarring to the system. It's too much of a hassle. It's not. They don't want science the foundation of science to waver even in the slightest. Even though it's like, look, the Mercator map is wrong. Even if you don't believe in a flat Earth, the Mercator map is wrong, and they will not show you that. And it's amazing that they've held on to it. I mean, it's a 500-year-old map. You didn't think there were going to be some mistakes? It's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. There's definitely a lot of things I agree with you here. One of the objections that comes up very quickly if you sort of start talking about the idea of a flat Earth, people will say you can see the curvature from a plane.
Yeah.
Now I travel a lot, and I always look out the window, and I would say you can't see the curvature from a plane. But I think what people think is mean is that when you look to the horizon, you can see that sort of little glowy bit that people relate to the curvature of the Earth, but it's not actually. You can't actually see the curvature of the Earth from a plane.
No, you can't. And I put the challenge out to people at least 18 months ago. I said, look, if you think, because I still have people that say they see the curve from the beach. It's like, no, you don't see the curve. You want to see the curve. There's a big difference. This is very George Orwellian, which is if you are told the Earth is curved, you're going to see it eventually because your mind is going to want to see it. I've had people say they've seen it from mountaintops and that they've seen it from planes. Okay, fine. Every time I have somebody do that, I've got a cool little, there's a bunch of videos out there, but I just pick one. Okay, so here's a weather balloon from 120,000 feet. That's 4 times higher than commercial air traffic. It's video. It's not a still shot, and it's long and it's perfectly flat, absolutely around, and it spins around, and everywhere it looks, it's absolutely flat. So if it's flat at 120,000 feet, and yet the Red Bull jump with Felix Baumgartner shows, at about the same distance, maybe a little higher, maybe 130,000 feet, shows a severe curvature, then one of those 2 videos is lying. Which do you think it is? The one that was shown on mainstream with Red Bull endorsing it, or the one, because that's the one they want to do. It's like, well, if we put a fisheye lens on it, it'll make him look like he's even higher. It's way, way higher. It's like, look, it's only 120, 130,000 feet. You're not going to see even Neil deGrasse Tyson says, look, you can't see the curvature of the Earth from any civilian means. And then it leads back to, okay, so only the military has access to the curvature of the Earth. Well, yes.
Yeah, the Red Bull jump, a lot of people think that's proof, but it's very easy to realize that. I mean, that's not the curvature of the Earth. They're using a fisheye lens. You only need to look down because the area they're looking at is just, if that's the whole Earth, then it doesn't make any sense, does it, with what you can see?
No. The fisheye lens is way too severe, and if people don't know what a fisheye lens is, it's a peephole lens. So when you're looking through a peephole in your door, it makes your hallway look curved, but you know that your hallway isn't curved because you can open the door and you can go out and look. That's the difference. Whereas the average person can't go up into space to see it for themselves. But I'll put the challenge out to your listeners as well, which is if you think you see the curvature, you take a picture of it, you put it on your laptop or your tablet or whatever, and you hold a straight edge up to it. Tell me if the curve's still there. And if it is, send it to me, and I will quit Flat Earth right now. To date, no one has sent me anything. In fact, the closest we got was a pilot. In fact, it was just about a month ago, who, and I made a video on it, who sent a picture to his buddy, and the clouds were sort of curvy, but when you cranked up the contrast, you could see the actual horizon, and it was flat as a board. And again, that pilot, which is one of the few pilots that actually, still was believing it. Every pilot I've talked to says the same thing. They say, "Oh yeah, we see flat. We see it's absolutely flat once you get above the weather." But because we're told it's a globe, and because we get from point A to point B, we put it out of our minds. It's this weird paradox for pilots. They all see it's flat. They see it every freaking day. But there's nothing they can do about it, because even if you convinced yourself it was flat, if you're a pilot, who are you going to tell? You'd be out of a job 2 seconds. You're not going to get on a plane with somebody that thinks the world's flat. Not going to happen.
I thought I'd found a video the other day that showed the curve, but it was from a balloon. But then I was dismayed to see when it landed, the Earth was still curved.
Oh yeah, that's the dead giveaway. When they get down to the ground, the curvature. You'll see, you're just literally sitting on the ground, but it looks like you're on a hill. It's the fisheye lenses have been great for photography over the years, but they have really helped the globalist movement, because you can use them in just about anything, and at any altitude, it will make the surface of the Earth curved. And when you're listening to this, I'm not saying a little bit of curve. I'm talking severe curvature, to where if you believe the curvature and you know anything about math, the Earth would not even be 1,000 miles wide. It would be tiny, because the curvature is so much. You complete the circle. It's ridiculous.
So anyone who's listening who's just thinking about looking through this and researching it, just make sure you check if it's a balloon or something like that. Check when it's on the ground. Is there still a curve? Because if there is, it's definitely a fisheye lens. I wanted to move on to a few more questions. You actually mentioned something about this a second ago, but I wanted to ask you, how easy would it be for you to drop this idea? I mean, what kind of information or proof would you need to prove to you that you live on a globe?
I need a lot at this point. We've created so much reasonable doubt in the globe that I don't know if there's any one thing. If I had to do one thing, if somebody had to show me one thing, it'd have to be 4K resolution NASA footage taken from the rocket pad, leaving Earth orbit, and getting several million miles out at least. And that footage would have to be the original. We would have to be able to analyze it and tear it apart and see if we could find the flaws. Because right now there's nothing that's without flaws, and that footage that I just told you doesn't exist, which is why I'm waiting with not necessarily bated breath, but I'm waiting for the SpaceX mission that they're talking about, taking tourists around the moon next year. Next year. I can't wait to see how they try to fake that. It's never going to happen.
It will be interesting in the next sort of few decades as to whether there's going to be another moon mission, or some of these things will be revealed for sure.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to also say, I think sometimes if you make a statement, people are going to just laugh, but I think you then have to put it back to them, and for example, I was going to say, how about the sun? Do you think it's closer than we've been told? I've heard that many flat earthers believe it's like 3,000 miles away.
3,000 miles.
And I just wanted to make the point that a lot of people are going to laugh at that, but then really, we've got nothing to go on. The average man on the street has nothing to go on. They're literally putting their trust in science, and that's what a lot of this boils down to. Is like, how much do you trust science? And there are some people that trust it implicitly and will say it's just ridiculous to say that the sun is 3,000 miles away. What about yourself? What would you say about that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I follow the whole dome theory, hence the website enclosedworld.com, that we're in a Truman show. And if it is a giant Truman show, that this thing kind of looks like a shallow sports stadium from the outside, that the sun and the moon are inside this thing. They kind of spin around like a yin-yang symbol. They're both about 3,000 miles away. They're both about the same size, maybe less than 50 miles across. The sun is some sort of directional light system, so it's not omnidirectional, because people will come back and say, well, there's time zones. Wouldn't the sun light up everything at once? I'm going, not if it's a directional light source, and not if it's really, really small. I've physically got a model lying around that shows what it looks like, and not just computer simulation. There's people that have made wonderful models that show what the sun will look like over this thing. It's like a mobile spinning around a child's crib. That's all you need. And again, NASA's you got to remember who told you the dimensions of this place. Who told you the moon was 237,000 miles away? Who told you the sun was 93 million miles away? The same guys that told you they went to the moon? Those guys? That nobody else went to the moon? 40 years later, no one's even talking about going to the moon. Now they're talking about Mars, never going to happen. It's you put your faith, blind faith, into people to where now they're just abusing it. Now they're just throwing stuff all the time. I mean, every year it's like, oh, here's an asteroid that looks like a Halloween thing. Here's an asteroid that looks like Santa Claus. Here's an asteroid that looks like a duck. All the space stories are the same thing. They're not necessarily meant to inspire fear. They're meant to reinforce the globe. It doesn't matter if there's a face on Mars or a hexagram on Saturn or a new thing of Pluto. It's the subtext, which is something on Mars because you're on a globe. Something on Saturn, globe. It goes on and on and on. It's just to reinforce the globe. That's their primary goal, is to keep you thinking that you're in, an insignificant speck that's just flying through this massive space, instead of, again, the Truman Show reference, where you're actually very, very significant in a very small place, and it was designed to have you acting naturally.
And atheists probably wouldn't be all too happy with the idea of what you described with a dome and a flat Earth, because that really would lend itself to a designed Earth, wouldn't it?
Yeah, this puts a test on atheism, no question, because even if, again, I'm not going to put a name on God, because I still think the major five religions have pieces to the same puzzle here, but they make up 80% of the population, those five religions, and if this place was built, if it is the shape we think it is, then it was built. And if it was built, there's, I hate to say it, but there's a lot of leaning towards a creator. And yeah, you could split hairs and say, okay, it's an advanced technology versus a divine being, but really, how much would we be able to tell the difference between the two? If a giant golden eggy spaceship landed and said we built it, most people would go for that and say, yeah, okay, as long as they didn't look like us.
Yeah, and in Genesis in the Bible, actually, it does say, let us create them in our image, and
right.
It almost lends itself to an alien concept.
Yeah, well, and then that's just it. Are they alien? Because I'm saying that, look, Mars, Jupiter, Venus, all that stuff, that's not out there anymore. So I still think that a lot, people that we say are aliens, ships. Absolutely, there's ships flying around. You can take night vision and watch them anytime you want out there. Just you have to have night vision though. I don't think they're from other planets. I think they're just older versions of us. I think we are not even close to being the first people to rent this apartment. I think this is a fairly old place, and that our civilization, it's only been around 5,000 years. We're just the newest tenants.
Right. And a lot of scientists will talk about the ability to create experiments to prove things. Do you think we should be able to replicate a spinning ball with water on the surface in some kind of atmospheric chamber? Do you think that should be possible if a
it can't be done, because you can't compensate for the gravity problem. I know it's a simple argument. People go, water doesn't stick to a ball. Well, the problem is that you can't test it in a 0G environment. Not really. I mean, yeah, you could test it. Yeah, you could test it in a 0G plane, technically, for a little while, even though they haven't bothered to do that, which I think is kind of curious. Maybe it'd be kind of too messy. I mean, yeah, you can put a water droplet and it turns into a sphere, sure. But the problem with a plane is there's gravity. Everything has mass, and so you've got gravitational processes happening all over the place. So I don't think you can do an objective test down here. But to that point, there is something very interesting about this world when it comes to gravity, if you believe in the sphere, which is the oceans are perfectly level all over the place, meaning they're perfectly uniform. And saying, what does that mean? I'm saying, well, you take anything like a merry-go-round, right? If the Earth is spinning at 1,000 miles at the equator, yeah, it's very slow over a 24-hour period, but it's still 1,000 miles an hour. Those oceans, which are very, very big, should start pooling a little bit at least a little bit at the equator. There should be a big bulge of water. There should be like no coastline at the equator. It's kind of like a poor man's version of Saturn's rings. And there should be bald spots on the northern pole, the North Pole and the South Pole, if you believe in the globe. And yet we don't see that. That isn't there. You're telling me that centrifugal force is completely counteracted. Centrifugal force with water, with liquid, is completely counteracted by gravity. I don't buy it. I don't. The other thing would be, just ever so slightly, remember, a merry-go-round. If it's spinning at the outer edge, then it's not spinning at all in the center, which means at the North Pole, you don't have any centrifugal force at all. So if there's no centrifugal force, that means that an object should weigh slightly more at the North Pole than it does at the equator. Because remember, the centrifugal force tries to push things off. It should be measurable. We have very precise instruments nowadays, and yet we don't see any test along science's lines, that show it.
Can
So
you
a lot
think
of
of can you think of an experiment that could be done that would prove this one way or another? I mean, for example, if you fired a laser over an ocean, and it appeared to be flat along the entire surface, that would probably prove the flat Earth model, wouldn't it?
Well, yeah, but you can't, because laser, you got dispersal patterns. In fact, we tried that early on, where your good lasers, I mean, not industrial lasers, they spread about 2 feet per mile, and to where the beam gets way too big, which is, of course, all right, well, if you're shooting at the moon 237,000 miles away, you're getting, what, 500,000 feet of dispersal just to get there. Then how you're reading photons the way back, that's a whole other thing. But there's too much atmosphere. You got to remember, you're only breathing 20% oxygen. The rest is nitrogen, and it's too thick. The laser, you'd never be able to get it across an ocean. There's just too much between here and there. But again, 150 miles, you should, less than an entire ocean, a laser test, if you could get the beam small enough, should be able to prove something, which is why the subject matter expert that I did, the Navy guy, the missile instructor from the United States Navy, who was using beam radar, very small beam radar, going at 50 nautical miles or 60 land miles ship to ship. And that's 2,000 feet of curvature, should not be able to hit that other ship from that height. And he could every time. And he goes, how are we doing that? That's a fairly small distance. That's only 60 land miles. And, we could do that with military equipment now. The ultimate test, of course, would be to test the coastline of Antarctica. And you'd have to do an objective test. You can't just have the military tell you, because that's the one thing that's absolutely foreign to, it's completely different from the globe model, which is Antarctica isn't this continent that looks like Australia. It is just this massive continent that sweeps around all of us, that's completely on the outside of us, like a big ring. And it's not necessarily an ice wall. I know everyone, they say, it's a wall. It's like, well, it's a shoreline, a couple hundred feet, but it's not the wall from Game of Thrones. But it does go up even higher. The continent, even mainstream science will tell you, the entire Antarctic continent is about 14,000 feet high, which is really, really weird. It's very unique when it comes to continents. But anyway, to test the Antarctic coastline, because it would be 10 times longer, the coastline, than it would be on a globe Earth. That would have to be tested, if it could be tested. But the Antarctic Treaty forbids even testing, within several hundred miles of the coastline of Antarctica. Antarctica is locked down forever, which, again, people should look into that, the 1959 treaty.
It's quite a mysterious place, isn't it, Antarctica? Some people believe there's secret bases there, and there seems to be lots of mysterious trips recently by celebrities.
Right.
So yeah, if someone could go to the edge there, it'd be great to prove it once and for all.
If you could, I mean, the average person can go there. You want to spend, if you're using British pounds, about 10,000 British pounds to get there. But you're only going to be allowed to do the coastlines, take pictures with penguins, the peninsula. You may get taken to the pole, maybe, if you're lucky enough to do it, but you're not going to be allowed to roam around free. Excuse me.
AntarcticFlights.com claim that they can fly for 4 hours over the ice. Would you be saying that they just see a small part of Antarctica, or are the flights fake?
It could be either, but I think they only see a small part of Antarctica. I think it's you gotta remember that Antarctica, the world's greatest explorer, in my opinion, Richard Byrd, United States Admiral, he flew over that thing for the better part of 30 years before he finally found whatever it was he was going to find. I think the coastline, when you hit the Antarctic coastline, still think there's thousands of miles before you get to. I'm not going to call it the edge. I'm going to call it the outer marker, the outer barrier, which is the end of the world as it was. But I don't. Everyone keeps saying, "Oh, it's the ocean," where the ocean sloughs off into space. It's like, dude, come on. Stop thinking that far back. It's much more modern than that. It is, again, the Truman Show. How did the water get held in the Truman Show? It was a big structure, and that's anyone that's doing stuff in the Antarctica. It's very, very limited. The governments down there, some scientists down there, no corporations. Again, that to me was such a huge flag, which was no corporation is allowed to go down and set up shop in Antarctica ever. No country. No matter how much money. It's like, what are you talking about? Petroleum companies can get in anywhere. Mining companies can get in anywhere. There's companies that can spend the money. They'll do the lobbying to do it, and it's ironclad. No country. They're not even allowed to talk about it. That's also a big tell. Which is not only is my corporation, which has billions of dollars, and I can bribe my way into anywhere, including national parks. I'm not even allowed to suggest it. How does that happen? What conspiracy is bigger than money? Well, I can think of one. That is one where you get to hide the whole world, and it's been very clever. But fortunately, they've run out of time.
We've almost run out of time as well. But just a couple more questions.
Mm-hmm.
This one's deviating slightly. I don't know if you remember the Malaysian plane that went missing, the MH370.
Sure.
It's a topic we've covered quite extensively on this show, and I wondered if you saw any significance in the fact that the plane disappeared in the southern hemisphere, where you mentioned planes aren't tracked.
Disappeared. Yeah.
And was said to be heading for Antarctica.
Oh, I did not know that. I had not heard that.
If you type in MH370 Antarctica, you'll see that almost all articles accept the fact that the route it was going was heading for Antarctica.
That's interesting. I had no idea. It wouldn't necessarily surprise me. The flights in the southern hemisphere was one of the things that got me into the clues, which was that planes, when they get offshore, and it's not just in the southern hemisphere, it's also in the northern hemisphere. If your plane gets away from land to a point where there's no islands, significant islands between you and wherever your destination is, your GPS system will drop off. Now, the plane will still get going where it's going because it's on autopilot. It's going to find its way. But the tracking system goes off, meaning your latitude and longitude disappears and your plane goes into approximated or estimated mode. And this is very interesting because it is completely counterintuitive to what we've been told. Look, if the GPS system, which is the United States Department of Defense, 32 supposed satellites, blanket coverage, there should be no blind spots anywhere. And yet every plane, you can really watch this in the southern hemisphere, just blinks off. Once it gets like 150, 200 miles offshore, which is out of the range of normal radar, it disappears. And it does not come back until it gets within land distance of wherever it is. Same thing like if you're flying in the northern hemisphere, like from Los Angeles to Hawaii. When you get to a certain point, your plane is gone. Oh, no, the graphics still may be there depending on which system you look at, but you try to get the latitude and longitude, nope, gone. And that is because, and it's basically what it's telling me is it's the old LORAN system, LORAN, also U.S. military. They just slapped a new sticker on it when they went to the space age and said that, oh yeah, we're doing it all by satellites now. And that's not, so when the Malaysian flight disappeared in the area in the Indian Ocean where there was no coverage, that particular point, that always bugged me anyway, because I'm from the Northwest where Boeing is headquartered. And that was a 777, that's state of the art. That's a flagship. And you're telling me the state of the art plane was not being tracked and nobody found anything? Of course, later say, oh, we found this wreckage and this wreckage. It's like, really? Where'd the black box go? Where did that plane go down exactly? It was the Indian Ocean. It wasn't the Pacific Ocean. South Pacific things can get lost. Indian Ocean, come on. You're telling me nobody knew where that plane was? It dropped off. It was very, very interesting, though.
It is a very interesting topic. Hence, anyone who wants to check out our episodes on that, go to our website, which I'll give you later, and we'll get Mark's website soon. We probably need to wind up now, Mark, but I wanted to ask you. I've been looking into this and I'm still not decided, but I'm not 100% sure what I'm living on at the moment. Some people have said to me though, who cares? Why does it matter whether the Earth's spherical or flat? Which I personally I think is crazy. Like, of course it matters, but I wondered what your reactions to that.
I've heard that a lot. Maybe 1 in every 10 emails I get is, it's like, why does it matter? I'm going, okay. One, you're just saying that because your life is so hectic and stressful. That's all you can think about. So, they say, well, I still have to go to my crappy job tomorrow, and my wife still hates me, and my kids don't listen, blah, blah, blah. It's like, yeah. But when this happens, and for those people, it wouldn't matter until it did, until the day it did. And I will use a Truman Show reference here, which is the second that Truman even had an inkling the world was not what he thought what it was. That was his obsession. That's all he cared about. That's all the way. And again, human beings, there's a reason why this place was hidden for as long as it was, because every other species on this planet figures out instinctively a way to live within its means. If human beings figured out that they were in some sort of confinement, that's all anyone would talk about. Entire new religions would pop up. Churches would relocate. Cities would relocate. It's all the media would talk about for years. If somebody didn't step forward and say, we built it, it would be, okay, that's all. People would be thinking about this all the time because it changes everything that you know. You're not an insignificant speck anymore. Now you're part of something. You would have an endless series of questions, and we all know what they are, which is, who made this place? Who made me? Why am I here? Now, these are old questions we've had before, but now we're way closer to figuring that out than we've ever been. And that's exciting. That's why this thing is gaining so much traction and is so much more popular than the average run-of-the-mill conspiracy, is because it's the only one I know that has a message of hope. You want to know why you're here? You want to know, the meaning of life? This is one giant step closer.
Yeah, it would also be a huge lie, and would make people wonder, what other things have they been lied about.
True.
Once people have explored the main ideas of flat Earth, for anyone who's interested, I'm sure some people listening will be looking into this now, and they're intrigued enough to continue their research. Do you have any advice on what to look into for more advanced aspects of the idea of a flat Earth?
First thing, if you were going to look into it, again, you got to promote the community first. Just go into YouTube, type in flat Earth, and because the cream always rises to the top, the first 20 or 30 videos are generally pretty good. And if you want to see my stuff, type in flat Earth clues. I put together a short list that's got a great combination, great variety of videos from different artists in my YouTube channel. It's called the Flat Earth Short List for new people. That's pretty good. But once you get into it, you're going to be jumping all over the place anyway. I mean, there's no one right road, one right path to go down. So everyone's just going to have to find their own way. But what I try to recommend to people is, like, look, it's easier said than done, but pace yourself, because you're going to get burned out eventually. You try watching flat Earth videos for 3 days without sleep, you're going to be in a pretty weird place by the time you get done. Although we haven't heard of anybody shooting up a post office or anything. So that's why I'd recommend to people. Just take it easy, do your own research. Don't believe anything I've said here. Ask your own questions and prove it for yourself, because I'm not going to convince you in one show.
Yeah, and your website is enclosedworld.com, is that right?
Enclosedworld.com, but honestly, the faster route, the faster track would be just go into YouTube, type in Flat Earth Clues. You will find my channel eventually. It's called Mark Sargent.
Great. And just final question. What are you working on at the moment? What's the next stage for you? I mean, are you planning on just talking about this for a long period of time? Is there any kind of aim that you've got?
Yeah. The big aim is mainstream, which is sooner or later, because everything still boils down to money when it comes to getting things out into the mainstream. Some producer's going to pick this thing up. It's only a matter of time. The question is, what are they going to do? Are they going to do a documentary? Are you going to do some sort of reality show? Are you going to do some sort of movie based on real events? Who knows? That's always in the background. I'm always talking to people along those lines. Who's going to pull the trigger? I'm focused, and until that happens, I'm going to be focused on the conference, first Flat Earth conference in the United States ever in the history of the United States is going to be happening this fall in Raleigh, North Carolina. That's in the middle of the East Coast, and a lot of people are going to be there. If you guys are interested, you can go to fe2017.com, or you can just type in Flat Earth Conference into YouTube and you'll find it.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks once again for joining us, Mark. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
It was a pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
So what did you think? Let me know all your views in the chat room at www.truthsentinel.co.uk or email me at scottsentinel9@gmail.com. Once again, that's www.truthsentinel.co.uk. Love to hear from you with any ideas on future episodes, or just come and say hello. Thanks very much for listening. Goodbye.